Hey, it's Scott Petrak back with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Training camp will start next week, and while the focus will soon be the quarterback competition, the lead up to camp has been marred by the domestic violence arrest of rookie running back Quinshon Judkins. Here to discuss that and more, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Well, Scott, I've just been enjoying my PTO time that you've graciously given to me here the last few weeks. Yeah, we haven't done this in a few weeks,
I
so
know.
good to be back.
I just got to remind you that it's unpaid PTO, Chud, by the way.
That's right. Just like the
But
podcast itself.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, you and me both.
Right.
But yeah, it's good to talk to you. And do you believe it, Chud? We're back in the football season here, huh?
I know. Well, we knew it was going to come quick, right?
Yeah.
The summer flies by. So this is going to pop up on Friday. Rookies report on Friday. And then let's get the schedule down. So camp starts on Wednesday.
Yep.
And then the first day fans can come is Friday.
Correct. Yeah. So rookies, this will post Friday morning, July 18th. So rookies report today, the 18th. Veterans and quarterbacks and some of the injured guys will be there early. And then the whole team, the rest of the veterans have to report the 22nd. So next Tuesday. And then the first practice is Wednesday. And the first practice open to fans is Friday.
And this year, no traveling. It's all back in Berea for the entire time. You like that? You glad that they're not getting away?
Yeah, they will do joint practices before in Carolina before the opener, the preseason opener, and then the next
Yeah.
week in Philadelphia before the second preseason game against the Eagles. But they've done that in the past. So I think Kevin Stefanski's trying to have the best of both worlds here, where they get a little bit of quality time away from campus, like they like to call the team headquarters in Berea, and then but not go away for the 9 days or whatever it is that they did for the Greenbrier. And I do like that, Judd. I think the Greenbrier served its purpose, especially that first year, which was 2023. But last year, I don't know, and maybe it's because they went 3-14, but it felt a little bit stale. I don't know if you can recreate the whole, we're going to spend a week together and we're going to do all this team chemistry and build this camaraderie. And who knows? It could be a chicken and egg thing. We're just looking back. I'm just looking back at it like it didn't work the second year. It worked the first year when they went to the playoffs. But it's a lot of money. It's a lot of hassle to take the whole or a lot of the organization to West Virginia for 10 days. So I think it had kind of run its course.
Yeah.
Well, and I never was a big fan of leaving Berea, right? I thought you should give as many chances to the fans to see practice as possible.
Yeah. And then what are they getting? Like 9 chances this year? Something like that?
I think it's 8. I think it's 8 open practices.
8. Okay. Off by 1 there. All right. So, Scott, it was pretty quiet. Besides the stadium controversy. But in typical Browns fashion, you can't go in off season and you can't come into camp without some sort of controversy and drama. And here we go, Quinshon Judkins. This is not a good scenario for a lot of reasons, Scott.
It's not. It's not. I think we should start with the life part of it, the off the field part of it. It's a serious charge. I know it's a misdemeanor, but from reading the alleged victim statement in the police report from the Fort Lauderdale police in Florida, she says that they were in the rental car together. They had just flown down to Fort Lauderdale, and she says he punched her in the face and showed police the bruises that were still left 5 days later because she went to the police 5 days later, and had pictures of when the bruises were even fresher, and showed those to the police. Said after she got out and got back in, she sat in the back seat and then said she said he punched her in the leg and arm there. So, I know it's only quote unquote only a misdemeanor, but that sounds serious. It is serious when a man punches a woman and punches her in the chin area. So yeah, to me it's a big deal. Chud, just that it happened or that it allegedly happened. And then from a football perspective, you have the possibility that he will be suspended by the NFL. We know the NFL has put an emphasis or focus on domestic violence and trying to curtail domestic violence. And we saw Mike Hall, you only have to go back 1 year to the Browns' second-round pick out of Ohio State, defensive tackle Mike Hall, got into a domestic incident during training camp, and he wound up being suspended for 5 games by the NFL. So, who knows? It's still in the early stages here. The arrest was only Saturday, so less than a week ago. But right now, I would expect Quinshon Judkins to be suspended, likely to start the season. And this is a guy that the Browns drafted number 36. They did not re-sign Nick Chubb. They're counting on him, or we're counting on him, to be, I think, the number 1 running back in an offense that is going to recommit to the run game and base itself on the run game. So I think this is it's a huge deal pretty much from every aspect, Chud. And, to go back to the run game focus, that's what they want to do. They want to play ball control. They want to play good defense. I think they want to beat teams, 22-19 or 20-17. And that will be harder to do if you don't have who I expected to be their week 1 starter at running back.
What about his lawyer, though, and the defense, or at least the statement that, claiming she waited days to report it, and also wasn't there celebrated a birthday or they did something together? Sure. Fill everyone in on that.
Yeah, the focus seemed to be that, it happened on July 7th, and it wasn't until, I want to say, the 12th that she went to the police. I listened to the 911 call that she made when she showed up at the police department. It wasn't like an emergency 911 call, where which you're, I guess, used to hearing from 911. She was outside the police station, and she needed somebody to unlock the door so she could come in and give her statement and tell police what happened. And the officer asks, "Why'd you wait?" And she said something to the effect of, "He's a high-profile guy, and I didn't want to affect his career." That's a paraphrase, but and I know that that's what lawyers do, is they bring up timelines, and that's what people trying to discredit alleged victims bring up. She said they tried to work through some things during that time. They had dated, according to her, they had lived together from May of 24 to December of 24, and then they had broken up and they were back together. She said she got, she talked to family and friends and then decided, this is serious enough, or she wasn't able to work through it with Judkins, whatever. That was her explanation for why it took, almost a week to go to the police. But yeah, that's how his lawyer is making a big deal of that, or seemed to in that initial hearing. So, we'll see if more details come out. He hasn't talked publicly, Quinshon Judkins. The Browns haven't said a lot about it, but who knows? We don't know how it's going to play out, Judd. But right now, I would expect a suspension, like I mentioned.
He hasn't even signed his deal, right?
No, so there's a bunch of layers to this, and yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So we talked about the rookies due to report today, right? Friday, July 18th. So I don't expect him to report. And the reason is he's not under contract. So he doesn't have to report. If you're not under contract, nobody expects you to report. I don't even know if you're allowed to report if you're not under contract. So I think the Browns are okay with this being delayed, at least for a while, as they try to sort through this because it is fresh. But yeah, and the reason he's not signed, he's the only one of the Browns' 7 draft picks that's not signed. I think now there's 29, is we're recording this, 29 of the 32 second-round picks have not signed. And for whatever reason, teams and agents are fighting over the amount of guaranteed money for second-round picks. So we all know the rookie wage scale has slotted everybody's salary. So there's no negotiation to be had about the actual contracts or the actual dollars in the contracts. But just the way it is, and I don't know if it's business or just the NFL, they got to find something to argue about, something to negotiate about. So the second round picks have made it about, or the agents for the second round picks have made it about guaranteed money. And the Browns gave Carson Schwetzinger, the linebacker out of UCLA, who's a number 33 pick, so the first pick of the second round, he got a fully guaranteed contract, and he signed his months ago. But then at some point, there becomes a battle. Okay, is all the money going to be guaranteed? It's not going to be the whole second round, so where does it stop? And the picks right behind Schwetzinger, the 2 picks between Schwetzinger and Judkins, were unsigned. So, I think teams and players wait to see how the guys ahead of them did. See what they did, see if he got guaranteed money. You don't want to, if you're the Browns, you don't want to sign Judkins to guaranteed money at 36, if 34 is not guaranteed. If you're Judkins, you don't want to take non-guaranteed money. If the guys behind you take guaranteed money. So right now there's a holdup with the second round, and he's caught up in that. And then it just happens to be now he's also dealing with this. So, I expect the Browns to eventually sign him and him to eventually sign. Does it affect the amount of guaranteed money he will get? It could, right? This arrest. Is there a chance that the Browns never sign him? I would say there's a small percent chance. I think the overwhelming likelihood is that they sign him. We've seen the Browns. Obviously, we saw Mike Hall last year. He kept practicing until the NFL suspended him or put him on the exempt list and then suspended him. Obviously we know the Deshaun Watson history. I think there would have to be really bad details, and I'm not saying Judkins allegedly punching the woman in the face is not a really bad detail, but I think there'd have to be more come out, or get more details even about just that specific incident or whatever for the Browns to say we're giving up on the number 36 pick before he even shows up for his first training camp. That just seems hard to fathom for me. But I guess if he's not signed, there's a chance that he could never be signed. I just don't think that's likely.
Yeah, it's a lot different than a 6th-round pick or something like that. We're
Right,
talking about we're talking about a guy they're really counting on. Nick Chubb's gone. Guy coming out of Ohio State. They have big plans for him. So definitely see that. Yep. All right, let's look forward to camp. How do you see Stefanski running this camp?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more difficult and more strenuous than his previous camps. And I'm working on a story, and I got all these previous stories that I've started. I'm working on. One of them's about an increased emphasis on toughness. And that might sound trite to fans. Well, of course, there's going to be a focus on toughness, and that's what football is. And I get that, but this regime, and it's not just Stefanski, but he's the coach, so we're going to, let's just label it Stefanski. There's a focus on trying to get guys healthy for week 1, trying to keep guys healthy for week 1, keeping them healthy throughout the entire 18-week season. And does that mean you don't go all out in training camp sometimes? Yeah, that's been part of it. That maybe you're not in pads a ton, or you're in pads for only part of it, or you only do, the Browns don't do live tackling drills, and not a lot of teams do, but they don't. And, I would say the amount of contact is probably, I would think, less than some teams across the league. And the practices are shorter. It feels like that. And I felt like that a lot last year, Chud, as we watched training camp, whether it was in West Virginia or in Berea. And, you had the Deshaun Watson factor where, he was coming back from the shoulder injury and they didn't want to, they were not treating him with kid gloves, but they were monitoring his reps and he wasn't taking every rep. And there was just I would say, a different pace to last year's training camp. And I think that will be ratcheted up this year. And I think they appreciated that they didn't do that last season, and it affected them during the season when they go 3-14. And they didn't play well early in the year. And we know this start of this season's schedule is really difficult. And they have to be ready to go week 1. They're putting a priority on that. And, they were coming off that playoff season in 2023. So I think it was a sense of, hey, we're going to be good this year. And just that overall sense of entitlement. Not that Kevin Stefanski was feeding into that. He wasn't. And, it's a new year and you got to come ready and all that. But I just think you're going to see a more physical, a crisper set of practices this year in training camp.
Storyline, we know what it's going to be. The quarterbacks, got 4 of them. Scott, do you see a scenario where all 4 quarterbacks are on the final roster?
It's a great question, Sean. And the short answer is yes. And the longer answer is, at one point, I would have said no way. That just doesn't happen in the NFL, and roster spots are too precious. But the more I think about it, the more I say to myself, let's say, whether it's Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett wins the starting job, right? One of the 2 veterans. If that guy gets hurt week 1 against the Bengals, are you ready to go with, as a team, Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders playing the Bengals week 1 if, you got to enter the game, or week 2 against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in Baltimore? Like, that seems a big ask to me, that all of a sudden that rookie is going to be your number 1 backup. And they did it 2 years ago with DTR, and that did not work out well. And, I would say Gabriel and Sanders are better quarterbacks than DTR. But are they ready? Are they ready to go week 1 or week 2 if there's an injury? I have serious questions about that. I think the Browns want to take their time, certainly with Shedeur Sanders. I think he's more of a project than Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel's older. He played more in college, went to was with 3 different programs over 6 seasons. But even then, I just don't know if you want to turn to Dillon Gabriel in week 2. And if you did that, and Flacco or Pickett were hurt and you got rid of the other guy, then all of a sudden Shedeur Sanders is, 1 snap away. So given that, I see a scenario where they could keep all 4, because I think they're keeping both rookies. The question is, do they keep both veterans? And I still would say I'd probably go against it. Like, if I were betting, I might go 60-40, 3 quarterbacks versus 4 quarterbacks. But I do think it's a realistic possibility.
Where do we stand right now in this competition heading into camp?
Well, I've had a shift, and we've talked about this 100 times, right? Like, going into the offseason, I thought it was Kenny Pickett's job. I thought they wanted Kenny Pickett to win the starting job. And I know it's only OTAs in minicamp in May and June. I was not blown away by Kenny Pickett. Nothing overwhelmed me, impressive, by watching him. I wasn't overly impressed by him. And I haven't been throughout his career, right? And I thought Joe Flacco looked better, even though Joe Flacco got way fewer reps because they know what they have in Joe Flacco. So you have that part where, okay, did Pickett, did he look better than Joe? I don't think so. And then you have the knowledge of, we know what Joe Flacco can do in Kevin Stefanski's system. We saw it in 2023. I believe the team has faith and trust in Flacco. And you talk to guys like Joe Bitonio and Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett, and they don't say they want Joe Flacco, but they say they want the quarterback that gives them the best chance to win right away. Like, I get the sense from these grizzled veterans, they're not looking for a rookie to come in, right? They don't want to punt on 2025. And I think if you're going out and trying to win and trying to beat those really difficult teams in those first 6 games of the season, Joe Flacco gives you the best chance to win. And I think that's going to remain the case. That doesn't mean Kenny Pickett can't win the job. And I think the Browns would love for the 27-year-old, who might be the long-term answer, to win the job. Right now, I just think it's going to wind up being Joe Flacco.
But you got Flacco at the top. That's your newest spot. And how do you rank them 1 through 4?
Yeah, I think it's Flacco, Pickett, and then I think it's a pretty big gap, Gabriel, Sanders, as far as who's going to be the starting quarterback. I like Sanders better than Gabriel. I might even like Sanders better than Pickett. But, I thought Sanders looked better in the offseason. But, Pickett's got more experience. Like I said, I think Sanders is more of a project. He had a relatively simplistic offense at Colorado, so there's a lot that he has to learn. So I think it's Flacco and Pickett competing, and I think it's relatively close odds on who will be the starter. Then I think there's a gap to Gabriel and Sanders. I would expect Gabriel to remain ahead of Sanders on the depth chart entering the season. But I would say there's a competition there and a chance for Sanders to pass him because I thought Sanders looked better in the offseason. I thought he threw it really well.
How do you feel about Sanders off the field? He's been doing some great community
Yeah.
service, and but then on the flip side, the speeding, cited for 2 speeding tickets. I don't know how
Yeah.
big of a deal is that, Scott. I kind of just work through where we're at with him off the field.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned both sides of it, Chud. Early in the offseason, it was, or when the break after minicamp was the 2 speeding tickets. And, I know people speed. I know young men with, high-powered cars speed. I didn't like the fact that he got two so close together, 2 speeding tickets. I think that's a bad sign. Shows bad judgment and bad decision making. Um, not that we're this, but I think we can all look at our lives. And I know when I was younger, I got speeding tickets, and not proud of that, but it happened. Now, it usually had me slow down for a while because you think you learn your lesson, or at least you don't want to pay the whatever fine, right? Whatever the speeding ticket is, I didn't want to pay that again. Now, the money probably means less, I'm sure means less to Sugar Sanders than it did to me, but I just think you should, right? I think you should learn from your mistakes. And the fact that he got two so closely together, the second one he's going 100 miles an hour, it's it's a bad look. It's a bad sign. Does that mean he's a terrible guy? No. Does it mean anything about his quarterback play? Probably not. But he needs to be better. But I don't think we should ignore, and I'm glad you brought it up, the fact that since the day he's been drafted, he has been involved in the community. Right? Right after the draft, he showed up in Cleveland and started, throwing to high school kids and going to speaking at Cleveland City schools. And then we saw him Wednesday, um, at a fundraising event for the apartment fires in Cleveland. He didn't have to do that, and he was there. And that brings great attention to the cause. And I believe him when that's something he wants to do. Um, so I think he's been good for the community, and he just needs to slow down when he's driving.
Well, I think we can all agree, Scott, quarterback is the top story heading into camp. What are the other storylines that fans should be focused on as we get going?
Well, I'm writing that right now, Chud. So we mentioned the
Oh,
quarterbacks. Yeah, that's one of them.
all
How
right.
about, how about Myles Garrett? This is the first time that he'll be on the field with fans present since his trade request, right? And that bothered a lot of people. And we talked about that where we thought the perception changed, right? When he first had the trade request, people said, yes, Myles is fed up with the losing, but as it got more public and as he flirted with other teams, I definitely think, and I know I'm pretty sure you're on board with this, that there was a backlash from the fans to Garrett. And then he signs a
Yeah.
big extension, and I don't think the big extension healed all those wounds from fans. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they react to Myles at training camp, and the first opportunity will be Friday, a week from today, Friday. I think it'll be warm applause. I think fans tend to forgive and forget, but it's going to be interesting. Will it be the same as it always was? I don't know. Will people make a big deal about it? Will they yell stuff at him? I don't know. It could happen. And then the other part of that is, and we're not going to see it during training camp, but if the Browns struggle early or struggle throughout the season, how's Myles Garrett going to handle that? I mean, he's signed a 4-year extension, so he's here for the long haul. But he wants to win Super Bowls. He wants to compete for championships. That was the main point of the trade request. So how does he handle if the Browns are 0-6, right? Or 2-10? Is he able to bite his tongue, which he wasn't able to do at the end of last year? So I think both aspects of that are going to be interesting to watch. So that's one of them. we talk about Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, Chud. It's a big year for those guys. I think Jimmy Haslam wants to keep stability, or the Haslam family wants to keep stability. But if they go 3-14 again, it's gonna be awfully hard, I think, for them to bring back the guys in charge of back-to-back 3-14 seasons, or whatever that is, 3-14 and 2-15, 3-14 and 4-13. I just think it's gonna be hard. So I think it's important for this team and this regime to show improvement, and it doesn't all have to be about wins, but I think a certain amount of it is about wins, and it can't be 3-14. I don't know if 5 wins is enough, or 6 wins, or I certainly think 7 wins would be enough. But I think that as we head into the season is something huge to watch. The roster is in a period of transition, and we saw that by the limited free agents that they signed, right? There weren't many big splash signings as there had been in the past. The roster needs to get younger and cheaper, and they've started that process. So how does that play out? And then the last one I'll give you is the offensive line, right? It's Juwan Jones and then 4 old guys. And, they're not old, but when Ethan Posick, I want to say, turns 30 August 5th, all 4 guys besides Juwan Jones will be 30, at least 30, and in the last year of their contracts. So the Browns are counting on the O-line to be a strength this season, and I understand why, and they've shown it, right? Joel Bitonio is a borderline Hall of Famer. Wyatt Teller's one of the best guards in the league. Jack Conklin's a 2-time All-Pro, and Ethan Posick has been a solid center. But they need to do it for one more year, and that's where it starts. And then you start looking toward the future of, are any of these guys coming back? Which ones are coming back? Does Joe Bitonio retire? So I think it's a big year for that group as a whole. And then you have Juwan Jones, who they're counting on to be their left tackle, and he needs to stay healthy and needs to show that he can do that. If not, then left tackle moves right behind quarterback as the biggest long-term needs.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I had a couple different things written down here for topics, and you pretty much crossed them all off the list. We're right there on the same page. My answer to you on the Garrett thing is I just have a feeling the fans will be fine with them. I just think that I don't know. I just don't think it will be as big of a deal. It doesn't seem like it carried over too much. I think at the time it was a big deal, but just the fact that he did come back the Browns didn't let him go, and whether I don't know. I just think people are going to forget about it quickly. I just, maybe you'll have a boo here or there, but what do you think? I think the fans will be fine with them.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think it's interesting. I think fans will be fine with them too, especially in person, right? In the age of social media and
yes,
where you can hide.
Right.
It's a lot easier to criticize guys that way, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think you're going to see somebody in the second row of the bleachers in Berea booing Myles Garrett. And part of that is because if you're going to spend the time to go to training camp practice, you're probably a huge fan and you want what's best for the Browns, and right, you're invested. So, but I just don't, I agree. I don't think you'll see that. I don't think in public Myles Garrett's getting booed in a restaurant. But if the Browns play poorly or Myles Garrett gets a bad offsides penalty, I think you'll see people complaining on social media. And the only reason I have a little bit of doubt is about the reaction is I played golf with somebody the other day, and they said something about the fans' issues with Myles Garrett. So it's there at some level.
It is. There, you're right, at some level. I like what you said, though. Now, listen, if something happens throughout the year, that could change things.
Sure.
But I think where we stand now, I don't think it'll be that much of a big deal. Two things I want to throw at you, though, is other storylines for me anyways. What about Mason Graham?
Yeah, I mean, talk about an under the radar number 5 pick, right? I mean, I feel like I need to talk more about him and write about him more, so I'm so glad you asked about him, Chud. But I don't know. I'm working on 5 players to watch, and I know he was on my list. I don't know if he made the final 5, just because there's other guys that jump out at you. But also, I feel like he's a sure thing. And maybe that's giving him too much credit and not respecting the fact that there's a big transition from college to the NFL. But I think he's going to step in and be your day one starter and be solid, if not really good. So they need him to do that. We talk about they're going to have to rely on this defense. Myles Garrett needs help up front, and that starts with Mason Graham. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him in pads for the first time, going against the Joe Bitonio and Wyatt Teller and Ethan Posick, because he'll be going against those guys all through training camp and see how he handles that and how he stacks up, what they say about him. But he should have an impact on this defense, and I'm expecting him to have a sizable impact on this defense.
What about the position I'm really looking at is wide receiver? How do you feel that they stack up there? And also Jerry Jeudy. I mean, Scott, at the fantasy football level, there's been so much talk about him over the years, and I feel like there's potential there. Wasn't he ranked in the top 100 for top 100 players in the NFL with that little poll I saw? And I think there could be some excitement for him.
Well, it's interesting, Chud. So yeah, let's start with him. Yeah, I think he was 92. I don't know. I hope I'm getting that right. But yeah, in the NFL, NFL media put out, its list of the top 100. So, he had a breakout year last year. He was fantastic. Finished sixth in the league with 1,229 receiving yards. Makes the Pro Bowl for the first time. And I expect him to be good this year. Again, like really good. I think he's a top flight receiver. Has the ability to get open, has good hands, good run after catch. The question is the quarterback going to get him the ball enough, right? Whoever is playing quarterback, can they get him the ball enough? That's number one. Number two is, does the rest of the offense take enough of the attention away from Jerry Jeudy where he's not getting constant double teams? And that might be a bigger question than a quarterback, Judd, because we don't know who is going to be the number 2 and number 3 receivers. The Browns would love for Deontay Johnson and Cedric Tillman to step up and be those guys. And if they're as good as the Browns hope, then the Browns have a really good 1, 2, 3. Deontay Johnson's a former Pro Bowler. Cedric Tillman's a former third-round pick that has shown glimpses. He's got great size. But Tillman's been inconsistent and injured. We know the train wreck of a season Deontay Johnson's coming off. The Browns are the only team to offer him anything in free agency, and it was a 1-year veteran minimum contract with no guaranteed money. So he's got to prove that he's the same player he was in Pittsburgh, the Pro Bowl player he was in Pittsburgh. And that's a big question mark for me. And Cedric Tillman's a big question mark. And beyond that, it's even bigger question marks. It's Jamari Thrash and Michael Woods II and David Bell coming off hip injury that sidelined him for almost all of last season. So they need Johnson and Tillman to be good for this passing game to be maybe even respectable. And then that would free up Jerry Jeudy. So what's interesting about Jerry Jeudy to me, Chud, and you talked about fantasy, is I got one of those betting things, and it's, who's going to lead the league in receiving. And I want to say there were 20 to 30 people on this list, and he was not on there. And it's a guy that finished 6th in the league last year, which means the betting, whoever's putting out this line, is not expecting the Browns to have a high-powered passing attack. And how much will that affect Jerry Jeudy's stats?
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I think you just renamed the Browns the question marks. The Cleveland. My goodness. All right, so that's pretty much it for me as far as leading you down the path for storylines. What are some other top players or position battles we should be looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking through my list here. We covered a lot of them. I want to bring up Ronnie Hickman. We talk about the roster transition. The Browns are in a spot where they need young guys on the roster to step into starting and or prominent roles and excel. DeJuan Jones at left tackle is one of them. Ronnie Hickman at safety is another. 3rd year, undrafted guy out of Ohio State. His started games. He's also dealt with injuries. Came back stronger this offseason, according to coordinator Jim Schwartz. He's going to start. I mean, the plan is for him to start at free safety after the Browns cut Juan Thornhill. And they haven't been able to solve that free safety spot since Andrew Berry's been here. They hope Hickman can be the answer. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Mike Hall Jr. alongside Mason Graham is another guy to watch. They've spent a lot of draft capital on that defensive tackle spot the last 2 years. Their second round pick and their first, their top pick in both drafts were D tackle. Those guys need to be a force inside, especially rushing the passer. David Njoku coming off a disappointing season, right? He had a breakthrough in 2023, first Pro Bowl season, got hurt in the opener last year, was never really the same. Even when he's on the field, wasn't as consistent or explosive as he was the year before. Last year of his contract, let's see if David Njoku has a bounce back this season. They drafted Harold Fannin Jr. I think they want Njoku to be around for a while, but I would say this is a key spot for him. And then one more, I'll give you two more real quick on defense. Linebacker, how's the group take shape? We know JOK won't play all year. You got Schlesinger new. You got Jordan Hicks back, Devin Bush back, and a couple other young guys, Mahmoud Diabate, Buki Watson. Who winds up getting a bunch of playing time? They signed that free agent from Cleveland, Jerome Baker. How does that position sort itself out? Is Schlesinger, can he take over and play close to as well as JOK was playing before he got hurt last year? And then who's the number 2 end besides Myles Garrett? It was Zadarius Smith until they traded him last year, and he'd been the guy for a year plus. They cut Obo Okoronkwo, I think, since the last time we did a podcast. So is it Joe Tryon-Shoyinka who they signed in free agency? Alex Wright is back from his torn tricep, former third-round pick. Isaiah McGuire showed a little bit last year. So who emerges is that number 2 defensive end opposite Myles, because they need someone. Yes, the defensive tackles will help and will help take some focus off Myles Garrett, but Myles is going to get double and triple teamed. Those other guys need to step up, and that includes whoever is getting the bulk of the reps at the other defensive end spot.
Scott, I want you to keep an eye on this and tell me if I'm way off base here, but because they've been kind of not great at wide receiver and they did draft the tight end so high, and if Njoku can, do what we've seen him do in the past and have some, he has shown signs of being, I don't know what the word is, but definitely productive. I don't want to say, I don't know if great's the word. I don't know. You know what I'm getting at though, but could you see them going with double tights a lot and utilizing that as a weapon?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt, Chud. And I think you're going to see that schematically as part of their, run, play action, set up, run the ball a bunch, set up play action passing. It's easy to do that with 2 tight ends. They drafted Harold Fannin Jr. to get him on the field. So, I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight ends. And I believe if you asked Andrew Berry, he would say the relying on tight ends in the passing game, using your running backs in the passing game, including Dylan Sampson, the 4th-round pick out of Tennessee, who they had lining up in the slot during the offseason, during, minicamp and the OTAs, can lessen the importance of the wideout position. Now, I don't know. I don't love that formula, but I understand that thinking. It's, hey, we're going to throw the ball to other guys, so we don't need our number 2 and 3 receivers to be great. I don't know if that works on 3rd and 10. It might work on 3rd and 2 and 2nd and 4. But I do think that's part of their overall plan, and to take some of the pressure off those receiver spots. But it brings us full circle to how we started this discussion, Chud. If Quinshon Judkins misses X number of games, then Dylan Sampson's going to have a bigger role in the backfield. And maybe that means less time as a slot receiver. And I really do think that they were planning to use him a good amount in the slot. And let's say Judkins is suspended week 1. All of a sudden, you probably have Jerome Ford as your number 1 back. And then maybe Dylan Sampson, if not your number 2, your 3rd down guy, or at least has a chance to be that guy. So, he's a rookie. You don't want too much on his plate. Maybe they sacrifice him being in the slot, and that would hurt let's call it the receiver position, if he's not part of that pie, part of that puzzle.
Two quick follow-ups on stuff we've talked about. The Judkins, it's just so disappointing because, Scott, even if it does work out, it's going to take longer now than it should have. So, you know what I mean? I mean, no matter what, there's going to be a delay in this process.
Yes, whether it's the fact that he misses the start of training camp because he hasn't signed his contract, whether it's he's on the commissioner's exempt list, whether it's he's suspended. Yeah, from a strictly football perspective, I don't see any way that it's not a setback. Mm-hmm. Even though running back is one of the easier positions, and we've seen rookies have an instant impact, and not to mention whatever he's dealing with. Like he probably put himself, or he may have put himself in this position, but that's still something that an athlete has to handle. And maybe you hear boos, you read about yourself online, all those things. I think we saw it affect Deshaun Watson as a player, what he was, and I hate to say dealing with, because then it feels like it takes responsibility away from the player. But I think I'm making my point. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right, Chad. I think it will slow down whatever impact and maybe minimize or lessen the impact that he would have, especially early. And then you have the impact it has on fans. I had one of my buddies text me yesterday about getting tired of cheering for guys that you don't want to cheer for. And, I don't want to, again, jump to a big conclusion because I think we're still early in this process, but I understand that feeling from fans.
And that leads me into my next thing. I don't feel like I set up my Garrett how I felt about how fans would be with him well enough. But Scott, I'm allowed to fumble as well. I have been talking on TV all morning long from 5 a.m. until 9 a.m. as we're doing 2 more hours. If you haven't heard, we WKYC Plus, our app, we do 2 extra hours in the morning now from 7 to 9. So we're on from 5 until 9. And the show's actually on from 4:30 until 9. Brissa, our traffic reporter, does the first half hour. So sometimes, Scott, when I'm recording this with you, I'm allowed to fumble because, I just, get a little tired. It's kind of like in baseball. You don't get a hit every time.
Well, first of all, Chud, you never fumble on TV. And second of all, you used to not work at all. Now you're working hard, man.
Thank you. Yes. But what it is that just made me think of how I want to explain this is that, like, I remember when it all came out, my daughter was so upset, and she's 15, and like literally, like, Myles Garrett was the reason. Like, if he left, I feel like she would have felt like she has no reason, or who does she root for, right? Chubb, you knew Chubb was leaving. If Garrett leaves, you don't have a quarterback to hitch onto. Like, I mean, it's just for these young fans. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think people are just going to be grateful that they still have greatness to watch. And I think they're going to get over that issue that was now months ago. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm glad you said that, Chad, because, and not that, I'm not telling anybody how to think or act. But having said that, I feel Myles Garrett deserves a little grace in that area. I think he's played incredibly hard for this team for 8 years, right? 8 years. He's a Hall of Famer, and you don't get to watch those guys or cheer for those guys very often. He's the best defensive player in the history of this organization. So, did he need to ask for the trade, and did that get a little ugly? And sure.
Yes.
But the fact that he's here, can it be water under the bridge? I think yes. And I think there had been enough goodwill built up between Myles Garrett and this fan base that I think you're right. I hope and expect that that it goes back to being like it was before the trade, because I really believe that Myles would like it to be that way. I think he loves to be loved. I think he loves the adoration the fans give him. And I think it's easier for fans, right? There should be a guy you can root for without having any reservations. And I'm not sure that trade request requires fans to kind of carry any grudge, if that makes sense.
Okay. Hey, do you want to talk about the stadium at all before we go?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess we should, because we haven't, but I'll just keep it quick. they're full steam ahead, right? The Browns, they got the $600 million from Ohio. It came from the unclaimed funds source. Now there's a lawsuit questioning if that's constitutional, that you can take money from that to give to, I guess, I don't know if it's to give to a professional sports entity or however it is, because it is the public's money. It just hasn't been claimed yet, but there's billions of dollars in there. The Browns are confident they're going to win any lawsuit. You know, the Modell lawsuit stuff, the budget, the Ohio State budget, changed the wording of the Modell lawsuit, but, you know, I think that can be challenged as well. But the Browns are confident they will win any lawsuit that pops up. And they're planning on being in Brook Park in 2029, Chud. So, you know, I think there's mixed feelings about it among the fan base. I get it. I just think that's the reality, is that it's going to be in 2029. And then it becomes, okay, what's the stadium like? And how do the Browns help Cleveland handle the lakefront? And it's a demolition of the stadium. It's, you know, development of the lakefront. The Browns, I talked to somebody yesterday, the Browns made an offer to the city of Cleveland before they got the $600 million from the state, offering to either pay for the whole demolition and help with the development, and Justin Bibb turned them down. This is according to somebody at the Browns. Now, how does that get resolved? Because the Cleveland needs the Browns to help, the Haslam's to help. If the Haslam's have been willing to help, you know, do the Haslam's still do that, even though, you know, they got the money they're looking from Ohio and didn't need the support of Cleveland? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I would, as a Northeast Ohioan, hope that the Haslams, quote unquote, do right by Cleveland. And they've tried to be involved in this. They've been involved with the discussions of the lakefront development. I would hope they continue to do that because they are taking the team out of Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I don't want to get into the debate of whether I want it in Cleveland or Brook Park, but let's just go with the fact that it's going to be in Brook Park.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be, that facility should be pretty amazing. And then if they finally figure out the waterfront, it could be great down. We've just had Scott, I mean, you and I are, you know, how many years of our life, well, our whole lives, right? Yeah. I mean, just living here and just knowing what that could be and just the wasted area it's been. So hopefully they get that right. It'd be pretty amazing to have both Brook Park and that waterfront, two different great facilities. Hopefully, I don't know if you call the waterfront a facility, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back, I don't know how long it takes to develop a lakefront, but let's say a decade from now, and you see events being brought to Brook Park that the Haslam's claim all these big events are coming, right? All these concerts and Final Fours and maybe a Super Bowl and Big Ten championships. If that stuff a decade from now, you go, oh, this stuff's coming, and Taylor Swift's here and whatever, and that's a real thing, and people are flocking to Brook Park, and at the same time you see the lakefront start to turn into something that it always could have been, then that would be a win-win, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think people would look back and go, okay, if that was the right decision, those are obviously two giant ifs, but yeah, I think that potential's there, Chud, for sure.
Last thing before we go, and we'll talk more about this in the upcoming weeks, but just to get it on recording here, Scott, a lot of people are saying like 2, 3, 4 wins. I don't know what the over/under is right now. I haven't looked. I think it was like around 4.5 or 5, right, or somewhere.
Yeah, it bounced. It depending where you look, 4.5 or 5.5.
Yeah, just on many years where I don't like when people think they're going to win 12 to 14. You know, I think this team can win more than 4 games. What do you think?
I do too. I do too. I would take the over. Now, can I see a scenario where they win 3 or 4? Certainly. And if they go 0-6 and you're playing a rookie quarterback the final 11 games, then anything's on the table. But I think there's a lot of talent on this team. Maybe not as much as I thought last year. But, you know, Myles Garrett's the best defensive player in the league. Denzel Ward's a top 10 defensive player in the league. You drafted Graham and Schlesinger, and right, I don't need to tell everybody the whole roster. You got some playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, but obviously serious questions on offense, where they were last in the league last year in scoring. But there's talent enough to win more than 4 or 5 games. I also think they were so bad in the turnovers last year. They didn't create any, and they turned it over a ton. That if even that just comes back to the league average, that results directly in more wins. So I think that's a huge key. I think you help yourself by running the ball, playing great defense. So yeah, I think there's easy ways for this team to go from 3 to 6 or 7. Now, can they get to 10? I'm not ruling that out. I think that feels a lot less likely. But yeah, I think, like I said, I would take the over. And then I would really hope if you took the over that they win a couple games in September, because then I'd feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, buddy, that's it for me. Unless you got anything else, I just have to say now people will be listening to this on Friday and maybe Saturday or Sunday.
Sure.
That's what's cool. That's what's cool about this. You got many days to listen to this to get yourself ready for Wednesday for that first practice, and then Friday, the first practice that the fans can go to. But I just want to say, in all honesty, we're recording this on Thursday. Happy birthday, buddy. Scott
Thanks,
Petrak,
Chud.
birthday is today. Happy birthday.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Chud. I really do. Yeah, birthday comes, and now it's nonstop work for the next 6 months. So I'm gonna try to enjoy tonight. Yeah,
yeah. Your present is work, and more work.
exactly right. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate it though, bud, and I appreciate you coming on again. It was nice to touch base, talk to you,
Yep.
and we'll be doing this a lot over the next coming months, huh?
Oh, we shall be.
All right.
Yep, no
I
doubt.
can't wait.
And I'm going to bring you on board as long as you're cool with doing
Yeah.
it. Come on the tube a little bit more this year with our extra hours.
Yeah, that'll be great. So,
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Chud, as always. Enjoy your weekend. And thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.